Hello again, Mouses, and welcome back to the Knob Mouse Show. We're doing a politics special today when George Osborne, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, has announced that we will need an extra £25 billion of cuts, with at least 12 billion of them apparently coming from the welfare state. The way this will work is that there are £17 billion worth of cuts coming this year. These were announced a while back. And then another 20 billion has to come out next year, which is an awful lot. I think we'll all agree on that. But here's the kicker. The thing that comes after that is another at least 25 billion pounds worth of cuts in 2016 to 17 and again in 2017 to 18. This is to balance the budget deficit that we have and basically stop us from having to borrow in order to pay for our structural payments, such as the welfare state, the health budget, the education budget, and things like that. So we're going to effectively have to cut back and cut back and cut back so that we are only paying out what we actually take in, which seems a fair way to run a country if you're in favour of having a very small government. If you're not, we have to work out how to pay for the extras that at the moment our budget and taxation system don't cover. Now, the Conservatives are saying we're going to do this by cutting back and cutting back and cutting back in gradual stages until we've got to the point where we can fund everything we're going to keep. Labour and the Liberal Democrats, on the other hand, say that the best way to do this is through tax increases, with Labour today saying that their tax increases would effectively come out at £330 extra per family for the entire country. And that's how they would fund the deficit at the point where they would theoretically take over. So this 2016 to 2017 and 2017 to 2018 budgets. So basically the extra 25 billion that has been announced today. The Lib Dems, on the other hand, are talking about a range of taxes, such as a mansion tax and things like that. Now, this has caused a wealth of different feeling, with some people that I've spoken to today tweeting to me saying that they're in favour of the budget and all of the cuts that are needed, while other people have been a bit more sceptical, and some have outright claimed that this is a bad idea and that it will lose the Conservatives the election. Perhaps it will, perhaps it won't. We have to wait and see on that one to see whether it's effective and whether it actually influences people going to the polling stations. Personally, I think it is going to have an effect on the polling situation. I can't say whether it's going to cause people to not vote or people to not vote the Conservatives, at least. But we'll have to wait and see. There's definitely going to be an effect. So let's have a look at some of the things that Osborne is suggesting will be needed to cut down on this £25 billion deficit. We've got a means testing of social housing tenants who have incomes of between 60 and 70,000 a year, because they are costing, at the moment, they're costing the taxpayer approximately £3,600 per year per house. So that's a fair amount of the budget. So what have we got there? That's going to take in about £40 to £76 million a year that we wouldn't have to cut elsewhere, which is an interesting idea, an interesting way of cutting the deficit. That's not going to harm the poorest, because if you're earning 60 to 76,000 a year, then you can probably afford the extra little bit of money that's going to have to come out. So I think we can mostly agree. But if you don't agree on that kind of budget cut, then do please tell us why in the comments. That would be a very interesting discussion. And we've also got this one that I think is going to cause an awful lot more problems for the Conservative Party, which is cutting housing benefit to under 25s, but not the under 25s who are parents or vulnerable groups such as domestic violence victims. Now, the amount that this changes things is debatable. The Conservative estimate is between £50 million and £1.2 billion, and that depends on how much their cut actually affects people. Now, £1.2 billion of cuts, that's a substantial amount. That is very interesting. However, I grew up in an area where there was only social housing if you weren't rich enough to be able to buy your own place, and these days you could probably not get a mortgage if you're under 25. You're just starting out in a career, or you haven't even managed to get a job, because I'm from the northeast. There's a massive unemployment problem, so whether you can get a job or not is debatable. So you've got to live somewhere. What if you can't live with your parents? What if there's a problem of housing there? Then you're going to need a place. But of course, that would possibly put you into the vulnerable persons group, so this cut wouldn't affect you. So it really comes down to just how big is this cut going to be? How drastic is it? And who exactly is going to be affected? We just don't know yet. We're going to have to wait and see on some figures on that one. But £50 million, if that's the limit, then is this really necessary to cut under 25s, who are a really vulnerable group and are effectively going to be the ones that have to foot the remainder of the bills for all of the problems and excesses that the current generation that has caused all of this has caused? So it's debatable. Again, I'd love to hear your comments if you put them in the comments bar below. Pensions, however, will not be affected. Now this one's interesting. From my point of view, I look at it as pension holders, for the most part, have paid and paid and paid throughout their working lives. So surely they should get the guarantee that they were given when they were paying and paying and paying. So I'm in favour of the triple lock on the pensions, which David Cameron says is guaranteed until 2020. Now, the other hand is, there are lots of people with pensions who have got top-ups on their own private pensions and this, that and the other. And can we not reduce the amount that they get in terms of all the wealthy pensioners who get the free bus pass, all the wealthy pensioners that get the free TV licence? Do we have to pay out all of that? Because those are additions, and they're fairly modern additions. It's not something that you would have been expecting when you were paying and paying and paying throughout your working life, because they're modern things. So what if we cut back on that? But at the same time, all of this extra, it's not going to claw back a huge amount, so it comes down to the vulnerable groups again. Pensioners in general are vulnerable groups. Where do you draw the line? So I'm kind of in favour of looking at least means testing some of the freebies that pensioners get, but at the same time it's back to vulnerable groups and the under 25s. These people have already paid in, and these people have paid and paid and paid throughout their lives. So perhaps the triple lock and the ring fencing is actually good. Speaking of ring fencing, health is ring fenced, education is ring fenced, foreign aid is ring fenced. Now, I've talked about foreign aid in the past, and I really think that at the moment when we are having to cut back so much, is it really a good idea to be spending that huge amount on foreign aid when there's no actual evidence that foreign aid does anything? I would be looking at not ring fencing foreign aid. Military spending, yes, we do need to spend on our military. We have to guarantee certain levels of protection and funding for our troops, because we have to remember that these are people who will literally go out and lay down their lives for the country. So I think we have to give them their due and fund them properly. So I can agree with the military spending ring fence, so let's leave that aside. So what does that leave it? Well, it really is down to the welfare state, and I have to admit, it may not be the best idea to squeeze the poor even more, especially when there are other options. Now, the Huffington Post, which is a bastion of liberalism and not always exactly firing on all cylinders, but it has produced some interesting ideas on where extra money could come from. Now, not everyone's going to agree on these. For example, we've got here some of the ideas of a pasty tax. Now, yeah, I don't think that's going to be a good idea. The last thing we need is extra taxes on food, for example. I really think that food should be totally exempt from VAT, but some things are luxuries, so perhaps not. But a pasty tax, we've already had this discussion, and it really is not really workable. It's going to cause more problems than it solves, and it adds extra burdens onto revenue and customs where they really should be looking in other areas. Fuel duty increases. Do we need a fuel duty increase? Isn't fuel duty big enough already? The biggest problem we have now is that forecourts are closing across the country, and a lot of the time it's because the people who run them can't actually make a profit, because the amount of taxation is killing small businesses in that way. So I'm not sure that fuel duty increases are actually the best way of doing this. A mansions tax. Now, this is favoured by Labour and the Liberal Democrats, and it seems like a very easy vote-winning idea. Let's tax the rich more. Well, yes, the rich can take a lot more taxation than the poor, obviously. But at the same time, would a mansions tax bring in all that much in terms of revenue? Would the rich not just move somewhere else, like a country that doesn't have a mansion tax? A lot of them will. Now, there was an argument that one of the people on Twitter who put this idea to me earlier on, said that not all rich people can leave. For example, footballers who are contracted. Yes, that's true. But there are ways around a mansion tax. For example, not having a mansion. So what do you do with all those massive houses that are there and that are built? What do you do with them? Because it's not going to work out as easy as some people think. Now, the final one that people are putting forward, and Huffington Post are putting forward, is the idea of not dropping corporation tax. Well, I'm going to say straight off that this is not a good idea. We've got to drop corporation tax because of the simple fact that other countries will take all of the companies that want to get a lower corporation tax. For example, Ireland is already doing a very good trade in being a kind of tax haven, if you will, where companies can put their head office and use European taxation laws and just funnel money out of the country. Google's over there, and a few other companies are as well, and they're siphoning off. We've already seen how it works. So we have to make Britain more competitive, because if we don't, then we'll lose more revenue than we'll gain on a tax increase, because companies will move elsewhere. And they already know how to deal with tax loopholes to get all the money out, so we better get some rather than none. Which brings me to my final point. The biggest thing that we need to do to balance our budget, instead of squeezing the poor, is to deal with the tax loopholes. Now, there is an argument that goes around Twitter all the time that the Conservatives are protecting all the businesses that fund them. I'm not convinced by this argument. However, if it were true, it's time to put country before party and deal with the tax loopholes. And I say that as a Conservative. I'm a member of the party. We have £120 billion in lost revenue through taxation, and we need to sort that out. This can deal with the whole of the budget deficit. We're not going to get it all. We're probably not going to get a large portion of it back. There will be other loopholes that we haven't found yet that will get abused instead. However, if we can cut down on the amount that we're losing, we can cut down on the amount that we have to cut. So we need to look at taxation. We need to make Britain a better place for companies to stay. We need to look at a better way of dealing with corporation tax and all of the corporation loopholes that they're using. We need to close down as many as we can, and we need to make big business pay its fair share. That will deal with a large part of the deficit, and it means that we won't have to deal with all of these stringent cuts to the same extent. Okay, anyway, that's my views on George Osborne and his new taxation ideas. I'd love to hear your views. As always, leave them in the comments section down below and we can have a discussion about it. But thank you very much for watching. If you did like this, remember to click the like button, share it with your friends so that they can see what's been going on with the deficit and deficit reduction plans as well. And do subscribe for future videos, because there will be more in the future. But until next time, I've been Zoe Kirk-Robinson. You've been watching the Knob Mouse Show, a politics special, and I'll see you next time.